So we discussed how Bharat Maharaj actually, the appearance of Bharat Maharaj, and how actually, how he left his family, kingdom, everything at a very, young age actually, and he went to do meditation, take up the devotional service of the Lord. Right? He went to Fulashrama, which is near Haridwar, near the Gandaki river. I mean, it's near to Nepal, where the Salagram Shilas are obtained. So that we have seen that. So Bharat Maharaj actually, he had actually almost attained the stage of Bhava. So he made progress in devotional life. So much so that he almost attained the perfection. Okay, so that we yesterday discussed about the different stages of devotional life, right? Like Ado, Shraddha, Tada, Sadhu Sangha, Vajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishta, Ruji, Asakti, Bhava, and Prema. So these are the different stages. We have discussed it in yesterday in little bit detail. So today we are going to continue the pastimes, of Bharat Maharaj. So we saw that he had already started exhibiting the symptoms of bhava, which is just before the prema. So almost he was attaining perfection, right? So it is mentioned that he was completely detached from all the material. He left his family, children, everything, all the material pleasures, and he went to the forest. And then there he actually had led a very austere life, eating only the roots, fruits, etc., and meditating upon the Supreme Lord, all the time. So his heart was filled with the bliss, due to the aesthetic love of the Supreme Person, Krishna. So this way he was almost attained perfection. Okay, so this is what actually we saw last time. So now we continue the discussion. So today we are going to discuss the eighth chapter. We'll discuss starting with the eighth chapter. So here actually further Bharat Maharaj, name of the chapter is a description of character of Bharat Maharaj. Okay, so here actually we will see the how Bharat Maharaj continues his austerity. Okay, so as part of his regular practice, once actually Bharat Maharaj, he has just finished his morning duties, right? And after that he sat down to meditate on Supreme Lord. Okay, so on the banks of the Gandaki river, he started chanting his mantra. Then what is he? He just observes that there was a deer or a doe. It is called deer. He that she deer. She came to drink the water in the lake, in the river, Gandaki river. And while she was drinking the water, suddenly they hear a roar of a lion. Right, it was very fierce sound, and the deer will get so much frightened. No, that is, she stops drinking, and she suddenly jumps to cross the river. Okay, and because it was told that the deer was so much frightened, and because of the sudden fear, and no, because it leaped. So the thing is that the deer was actually pregnant. Okay, and because of the sudden shock, she actually delivers a baby deer, and no, the deer actually the baby deer will fall in the river and starts floating, and the mother deer, she just crosses, and because of the shock she immediately passes away. So Bharat Maharaj observes this. So we know that a devotee is always compassionate, right? It is told that a devotee automatically develops all the good qualities which are found in devatas, right? So Bharat Maharaj actually was very, very compassionate to every living entity, because he was in a spiritual platform. So you used to see a living entity, the soul in every living entity. Okay, so in this case, Bharat Maharaj actually contemplates. He thinks that, now this deer, the small baby deer, actually is completely helpless, and there is nobody to take care of the deer. So he felt a very deep compassion. He actually takes this baby deer and brings it to his ashram. Okay, so what happens is that, gradually, Bharat Maharaj, he slowly becomes attached, because he doesn't have any other company in the forest. So he's completely living in a secluded place with nobody else. So because of the deer comes, he becomes attached to the deer, and treat it just like its own son, right? So he basically he used to feed the deer all the time, grass, always take protect the deer. Like whenever he travels, he actually takes the deer along with him, and sometimes he carries on the shoulder, right? This way, and he always petted the deer. So this way he actually becomes very, very more and more attached to the deer. Okay, and gradually, Bharat Maharaj, gradually starts forgetting the rules and regulations of advancement of spiritual life, right? And he gradually stopped to worship the Supreme Lord completely, over the period of time. So sometimes Bharat Maharaj used to think, even though this deer is disturbing my spiritual life, but because it is helpless and it is my duty to give protection to it, like that he used to think. So he is realizing that no, he actually is deviating little bit, but still actually he neglected, because of the attachment of the deer. So this way we all, he became more and more attached. I know he spent more and more time with the deer, and they were actually completely, he was completely attached to the deer over that period of time. Okay, and then sometimes what, so before he completely gave up worship, in the initial stages, whenever he used to worship, no, he used to get distracted by the deer frequently. Okay, so he was performing some religious activity, and every now and then he'll see what the deer is doing, whether the deer is safe. Like that, he used to continue interrupt his actual devotion service frequently. So he used to think that okay, my dear calf may be always happy in all respects. Like that, he was completely attached. So actually, we can relate to our life, right? So sometimes many of us actually become attached to our children in this way, right? So this is a natural affection for the children, right? So when the child is small, the child, though actually we are very much attracted to the child's behavior. Even if the child have little bit uncomfortable situation, we become highly distressed, and then we always worry, right? Sometimes we see that also, when we bring the child, we can see some devotees brings their children to the programs, or no, or the center, or to the temple. So then actually they are not able to attend to the class, because they always their attention goes to the child. The child actually will, either the child explicitly distract, or otherwise, even otherwise also, the parents will unnecessarily keep on thinking about child. Okay, whether she is comfortable, whether he is comfortable, like that. So this way, Maharaj Bharat, he treat this. So we see that he has given up the attachment to the family, long back. Actually his own family members, his wife, children, everything he has given up. But somehow or other, in this particular situation, he becomes completely attached to the deer, and considers the deer just like his own son, right? So one day, like this, days pass, and one day what happens is that it was actually evening time, and Bharat Maharaj sees that the deer has not returned back home. Right, it's about the sunset is about to happen. So he starts actually worrying, and he becomes almost like mad actually, worrying about what are the various possibilities could have happened. Whether somebody would have, some ferocious animal would have killed the deer, or what happened to the deer, like that. He was very much actually concerned, and he thinks various things actually. So like a madman, he starts thinking. Okay, so that's why actually we see sometimes in our material life also, when somebody is over affectionate to somebody, then actually we almost become like mad, right? We normally lose our own some senses, and sometimes when there is a problem like in the relationship, right, then actually people actually become mad. We see that many people actually lose their senses. So these are all normal human qualities or characteristics. So Sukadev Goswami actually says that, no, what could be the reason actually, because Bharat Maharaj was so much exalted, and then how can he actually become so much attached to the deity, even after knowing all the Vedic scriptures and the devotional principles? How could he get attached to the deer? So it is mentioned. Sukadev Goswami says that Bharat Maharaj was overwhelmed by uncontrollable desire, which was manifested in the form of deer due to the fruitive results of his past deeds. Like that is mentioned actually. He fell down from the mystic yoga, austerity, and worship of Supreme Personality of Godhead. If it were not due to his past fruitive activity, how could he have been attracted to the deer after giving up the association of his own son and the family, considering them stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual life? How could he show such uncontrollable affection to a deer? This was definitely due to his past karma. The king was so engrossed in petting and maintaining the deer that he fell down from his spiritual activities. In due course of time, insurmountable death, which is compared to a venomous snake that enters the hole of created by a mouse situated before him. So this way, we just mentioned. So one day, as I mentioned, in the evening time, the deer doesn't return, and then when he was in so very deep grief, and agony of separation, at that time actually death appears. Death comes actually. The time for is to leave the body comes. Okay, so Bharat Maharaj, while leaving his body, he actually laments. He was constantly thinking about the deer, and then he feels that the deer has come by his side, and it is lamenting, like that. He actually imagines, and with that kind of absorbed thought, actually Bharat Maharaj quits his body.
Prabhu, you can
Okay,
hear? Sure, Prabhu.
Yes, yes, Prabhu.
So, like, I didn't get. So, it was written that this is because of the result of his fruitative activities.
Mm-hmm.
So, generally, like, we understand that once, like, someone start performing devotional services, then all the basically the resultant reaction of the fruitative activities also burn down to ashes. But
Mm.
for him, like, why then it also has some reaction?
Yeah. So I'm not sure, Prabhu. The explicit answer I don't know. Okay. So because actually, see what Sukadev Goswami is saying is we have to take it, as the scriptural injunction or whatever as authority. So sometimes actually we discussed yesterday that no, the Lord's pastimes, the Lord's activities, or no, how the Lord actually basically influences different living entity to perform pastimes. Actually, sometimes it may be to set examples. Okay, so it is basically a warning for devotees who are progressing in devotion life that even if somebody can come up to the stage of bhava, right? No, there is actually no guarantee that no, we cannot fall down. So generally, there are some general scriptural rules or principles, right? And then there are always exceptions. Okay, so same way we can ask about um, the story of Ajamila, right? So Ajamila actually was a sinful person. All throughout his life, he had done so many sinful activities, and at the time of death, he actually remembered. He actually he just called his son's name Narayana, and then because of which actually he was saved from the Yamadudas, right? So some of the stories which actually we see in the scriptures, they are sometimes given to as an example for us. So some of them actually are exception than rule, right? So this way only we can understand, Prabhu.
Okay, Prabhu. So, um, like, can we also infer that maybe because Lord want that his basically devotees' glories um, can be like further understood or maybe recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam. So sometimes he may request his material energy to act maybe in more forceful manner to his devotee, uh, so that
So maybe, Prabhu. I mean, actually, we cannot speculate really, but this is actually more as an example. I would say that Bharat Maharaj story. He actually see normal in a normal scenario, a person would have already in such a situation he would have attained liberation or he would have gone back because we see that many other kings before Bharat Maharaj. It is explained that actually they were kings who ruled the earth planet for a very long period, and then they actually go to the forest and then they attain perfection. Okay, so Bharat Maharaj actually also was very much elevated, right? But in Bharat Maharaj's case, it is explicitly we will further see, he actually has to take more births, two more births actually before he actually get completely liberated. So this I would say my understanding is that this is an example for us that how much cautious we should be in devotional life, right? So generally we have a tendency that no, if we make some progress in devotional service or devotional life, we generally think that okay, we have achieved a lot, we are actually beyond beyond fall down. So so basically, so this is an example that even when come once see normally it is told yesterday we discussed about it that no, normally when you cross the nishta stage, then actually the fall down is difficult, right? So anartha nivritti is actually very difficult to pass over. But once normally comes to Nishta and over and above, then actually it is not normally it is not easily somebody will fall down at all. But in Bharat Maharaj's case, is an exception. Actually, he has it is told that he has almost reached Bhava. So in this particular case, it is not we cannot understand the situation by the normal principles. Why actually is fall down or why he got attracted to the deer. So it is just serving as an example that we have to be extremely cautious in our devotion life, whatever how much ever advanced we are. So we should always remain in that humble stage, and no, we should be always very much cautious about our devotional activity. We should never neglect it. So there is no specific no, this, except this what Sukadev Goswami is saying that it is because of there is no other reason no other than the fruitive activities is actually what Sukadev Goswami says here. Besides that, I don't see any shastric explanation why actually it is happening.
okay, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. You can continue, Prabhu.
Yeah. Okay. So So yeah, as a result of this, actually, we have seen that. So whatever thought actually a person has at time of quitting the body, accordingly we get the next body. Yam yam bhavi smaran bhavam tajadande kalevaram tam tam evedi kaundeya sadatat bhava bhavita. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, right? So accordingly, because Bharat Maharaj thought about a deer, he got the body of a deer in the next life. So only one advantage. So one great thing actually with Bharat Maharaj had advantageous thing was that even though he got a body of a deer, he was able to remember his past birth as Bharat, no, as a king, right? So this is actually a mercy of the Lord, we can say, right? So due to the rigid devotional service in his past life, he could understand the cause of his birth. In this body, considering his past and present life, he constantly repented his activities. So he was thinking like this: due to my personal foolishness, my mind again became attached. This time to a deer. Now I have obtained the body of a deer, and I have fallen far from my devotional practice. Right? That's what actually, that way Bharat Maharaj laments. So then by constantly remembering, by constant repentance, finally the deer actually, because he could remember his past birth, he actually was not like an ordinary deer. He was, throughout his life, he was very detached. It was mentioned that it used to eat only dry leaves, and then finally, Krishna. Yeah. So actually, the deer, it was born in a little faraway place from the full ashrama. But actually, towards the end of his life, the deer actually again returned back to the same place where the Bharat Maharaj used to live, right? And then it is mentioned that he actually last life he lived in a very very detached manner, not associating with other deers, etc. And finally, he gave up the body, okay, in that banks of the same holy river. Okay, so this is the second life of Bharat Maharaj as a deer. Okay, now the next chapter we will move on. Chapter 9. It actually describes about the pastimes of Jada Bharat, right? So after giving up the body of the deer, Bharat Maharaj actually takes the body. He was born in a Brahminical family, right? He was born in a qualified Brahmana family as a son of a Brahmana. So this Brahmana had two wives, and Bharat Maharaj will be born as the son of the second wife. The second wife had twins, one boy and a girl, and Jada Bharat was born as a boy. So again, by the mercy of the Lord, Bharat Maharaj was able to remember the past two lives. Okay, and he actually right from the beginning, right from very small age, he was always afraid actually about again he will fall down like that. So he used to always completely avoid all his relatives, friends, etc. He did not have any friends or relatives, and he behaved like a madman because if he behaved like a normal man, then I know he was feared that he would have to live like an ordinary person. So he will get entangled. No, he will have to do normal duties, whatever duties like in the different stages of life, and he has to interact with so many people. So to avoid that, Jadabharat actually what he does is that he behaves like a madman, like a dull, blind, and deaf, right? So he will behave like a complete fool, right? So this way, but in the mind, he was always thinking about Supreme Lord, chanting his glories and remembering his pastimes like that. So the Brahman, this father of Jadabharat, he was very affectionate to his son, and he wanted to become, make him a proper person. So he tries his best actually, to instruct him in Vedic scriptures, to teach him, how to live as a brahmachari. But whatever the father tries to do, Jadabharat actually neglects it. He just does opposite of what the father says. So finally, the father will give up advising him, and finally the father passes away, right? So once and his mother also, she also enters into the fire when the father dies. She also goes along with the father. So Jadabharat became actually completely, orphan. And his stepmother and stepbrothers, they actually neglects him completely because anyway, first of all, he's behaving like a mad person, and no, and then it was a stepson, right? So they actually did not take care of him properly, and all the people in general public, everybody used to make fun of Jadabharat because he behaved like a dull person. They mistreated him, and no, they. So whatever the bad behavior, Jadabharat actually tolerates everything. Somebody is not muted. Okay. Yeah. So the people used to mistreat Jadabharat. So he was actually completely detached internally, and he was always remembering the Lord. So people used to what you call misuse him or exploit him. So they used to make him do hard work, and especially his brothers. They actually they make him do a lot because he was very stout and strong. He was very strong body. He had very muscular body. So they used to engage him in working in the field, doing labor work, etc. But whatever was happening, he used to just tolerate everything, right? So it is mentioned like whatever small quantity, palatable, stale or tasteless, he would accept and eat. He never ate anything for sense gratification because he was already liberated from the bodily conception, which induces one to accept palatable or unpalatable food. So he was actually beyond the dualities, right? He was full of transcendental consciousness of devotion service, and therefore he was unaffected by the dualities of arising from the bodily conception. Actually, his body was, no, that was already mentioned, right? As strong as a bull, it was mentioned, right? And he didn't care for winter or summer or rain, etc., and never covered his body at any time. He lay down on the ground and never smeared oil on his body or took a bath. Because his body was dirty, his spiritual effulgence and knowledge were covered, just as the splendor of the valuable gem is covered by dirt. He only wore a dirty loin cloth and the sacred thread, which was blackish. So, like that, actually, he spent his days completely detached from the material world and always internally thinking about the Supreme Lord. Okay, being thus insulted and neglected by materialistic people, he wandered here and there. So then, as I mentioned, the stepbrothers actually they try to take advantage. No, they give him some labor work. Like for example, they will ask him to be a watchman in the field. They have a field, and then in the night, he used to be there to see that whether any animals comes and eat something. So he used to be a watchman there. So like that, one day, what happens is that there is a group of dacoits, who actually were the dacoits actually obviously they are in the mode of ignorance, right? So they actually are addicted to all kind of intoxication, etc. And then they were completely under concocted religious principles. So these dacoits were worshipping Bhadragali, and they were looking for a person to be sacrificed to Bhadragali. It is mentioned that a person actually who is like this well built and who is a dumb person is the ideal candidate for sacrifice. So when these dacoits were roaming around, they happened to see Jadabharat, and then immediately they capture him and bound him with rope, and then they took him to the temple of Kali. So Jadabharat actually, he was very strong, but he will not protest anything. So basically, he's always thinking that whatever actually is the will of the Lord, right? That will happen. So basically, we say that no, if Lord wants to protect, then actually nobody can kill him, and if Lord wants to kill somebody, then nobody can protect. What is that shloka? Rake Krishna Mare Krishna Rake. So this way, so Bharat Maharaj actually was in that. He was completely detached. He was not at all in the bodily platform. So these dacoits will take them to the Kali temple, right? And then they had imaginative ritualistic whatever they concocted, and then they, according to this thing, they bathed, they dress him with new clothes, decorate with ornaments, then smeared his body with central scents, wear him a tilaga. So basically, put him garland, and then they feed him very nicely, sumptuously, and then finally they bring him before the sacrificial altar, right? And then they do some puja of the Bhadragali by offering some lambs, incense, garland, all those things. And finally, no, the king, the ruler of the chief priest, actually, the main person who act like a chief priest, the main dacoit, he was actually ready to execute Bharat, right? Give sacrifice. So, so he actually took a big sword, which was supposed to, to kill Jada and he was about to kill him, right? So at that time, what happens? A wonderful thing happens. So there is a big deity of Kali, against which they are performing the sacrifice. So suddenly this deity actually bursts open, and real Bhadragali actually appears in front of them, right? And then she was extremely furious, because she actually understands that Jadabharat's exalted position. He's such an elevated soul, and then there is no reason actually for them to anybody to kill Jadabharat. So Goddess Kali become very very infuriated, and no, immediately she actually comes out of the deity form, breaking it, and within few moments, he kills all these. He means he cuts the head of all the dacoits, right, and started drinking their blood. And along with Bhadrakali, actually her associates also is there. So basically, no, everybody is finished, within no time. Okay, so this is actually one wonderful incident which happened. No, so basically the point is that all the demigods, goddesses, etc., right? They are all devotees of Krishna. So they will not tolerate any misdeeds against a devotee, right? So especially so Jada Bharat actually was such an elevated devotee that actually the goddess Kali could not tolerate, right? So that is why this actually incident is mentioned here. Okay, so now we actually move to the next chapter, 10th chapter. So this is actually the discussion between Jada Bharat and Maharaj Raugana. So after this incident, another incident is mentioned actually. So there was a king called Rahugana. He was ruler of the provinces called Sindhu and Sauvira, right? He was going to, so he was actually on the way to Kapilashrama, it is mentioned, right? And then he was carried by in a palanquin, right? There was some people, 4 people actually was carrying him in a palanquin, and it was on the river bank of river Ikshumati, right? That is where the incident is happening. So when actually they were passing, so these palanquin carriers were carrying the king for quite some time, and then they become very tired. So one of the persons, actually he becomes sick, and then they were looking for one substitute. So incidentally, they seize Jada Bharat, at that place. So then they were very happy because he is the best suitable person. No, as we mentioned, he was having a very strong and stout body, very muscular body. So they were very happy. So they actually they forcefully engaged Jada Bharat in carrying the palanquin. Right? Though he was completely detached, he was not involved in material activities, but they forced him. The king and the other palanquin carriers forced him to carry the palanquin. Okay, but as soon as the Jada Bharat starts carrying the palanquin, no, he was carrying it in a very erratic fashion. So what was happening is that he was actually no, he was in a Brahma Buddha stage, right? So he actually he sees, as I mentioned some time back, he sees the soul, Paramatma in every living entity. So he was seeing that when he was walking, there were a lot of ants on the road. So he was ensuring that he doesn't step on any hands, because of which he was moving his left here and there, and because of which and then sometimes he stops. So because of which the entire palanquin will rock, in a very unruly manner, and the king becomes very angry. Right, so he will ask actually. He'll ask the palanquin. He will warn them that no, if you don't carry properly, I'll punish you, right? But even after the warning, Jada Bharat actually will continue in the same manner because he cannot step on the hands, right? So then again, then the king will actually speak to. So then the palanquin carriers will tell that no, it is master, it is not our fault. It is because of this person who has joined new. This problem is happening. Then king will look at the Jada Bharat and then sees that he is a very stout and strong person. Then he will speak to him in a very sarcastic manner, saying that okay, oh, you're an old person, you're very weak, you're not able to carry the load. Like that, he sarcastically chastise him. Okay, but even after that, still the same thing will continue. Jadavarat actually, will not, he will not step on the hands. I know he will again slowly walk, stop sometimes. So then the king becomes extremely angry. Okay, then actually he'll shout, he'll scold. I mean, he will chastise Jadavarat, saying that he'll say like this: "You rascal, what are you doing? Are you dead despite the life within your body? Do you not know that I am your master? You are disregarding me and are not carrying out my order. For this obedience, I shall now punish you just like Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, punishes the sinful people. I shall give you proper treatment so that you will come to your senses and do correct thing." Like that, actually, he becomes very angry and chastises Jadabharat. So from now onwards, Jadabharat actually starts speaking because otherwise he was not speaking most of the time, right? He never speaks unnecessarily. So at this point of time, Jadabharat actually, he starts speaking. So basically, this is like the instructions which is giving Jadabharat's instruction to King Rahugana. What actually I'll so basically there's a long instruction, many slokas actually are there, where actually Jadabharat instructs King Rahugana. So I have just mentioned, I only noted down what are the most relevant or most important. Okay, so Jadabharat actually will say, "My dear king and hero, whatever you have spoken sarcastically is certainly true. Actually, these are not simply words of chastisement, for the body is the carrier. The load carried by the body does not belong to me, for I am the spirit soul. There is no contradiction in your statement because I am different from the body. I am not the carrier of the palanquin. The body is the carrier. Certainly, as you have hinted, I have not labored carrying the palanquin, for I am detached from the body. You have said that I am not stout and strong, and these words are befitting the person who does not know the distinction between the body and soul. The body may be fat or thin, but no learned man would say such a thing for the spirit soul. As far as the spirit soul is concerned, I am neither fat nor skinny. Therefore, you are correct when you say that I am not very stout. Also, if the object of this journey and the path of leading there were mine, there would be many troubles for me. But because they relate not to me but to my body, there is no trouble at all. So this way, actually, Jada Bharat starts speaking. Okay. Then there is further instruction. So he actually speaks further, saying that as you are thinking, as far as you are thinking that you are the king and the master and are thus trying to order me, this is also incorrect because these positions are temporary. Today you are a king and I am your servant, but tomorrow the position may be changed and you may be the servant and I am your master. These are temporary circumstances created by providence. Everyone is being forced by the laws of material nature. Therefore, no one is master and no one is servant. Nonetheless, if you think that you are the master and I am your servant, I shall accept this. Please order me. What can I do for you? So this way, Jada Bharat actually, he will start speaking. Okay, so here actually some comments are there. No, so he actually, because Jada Bharat was so humble, he never considered him as a great devotee. No, he was always considering him as as a very low person. No, and he was ready to he was agreed to suffer the results of his past karma like an ordinary man. No, he thought that carrying palanquin he was destroying the reactions of his past misdeeds. So he was thinking like this, right? So this is very important for us to understand, how actually a devotee should behave, when we are put into difficulties, right? So basically that was the mode of Jada Bharat. He was just thinking that okay, everything is because of my past activity, past misdeed or past karma, that actually I am suffering like this. So let my no so he just want to he just subjects him to the will of the Lord completely depending on the Lord. So in this context, there is an important sloka which I want to just say. It's in 10th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, 14th chapter 8 sloka. So the sloka is Tatte anukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatma kridam vipakam kridvag babubir vidadan namaste jivedayo mukti padesa dayabak. So this dayabak word actually is very important. We have to remember that. So the question dayabak means who is an eligible candidate to receive the mercy of Supreme Lord. So that is dayabak. So who is actually, so this sloka, what it means, what is explaining is that, so this is actually, this is the prayers by Lord Brahma to Krishna, right? So after the Brahma Vimana Lila, Lord Brahma tries to pacify Krishna. So in that actually, during that time, Brahma ji says like this, my dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your costless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. So actually, this is the mood of a real devotee. So we can see this mood in many of the devotees, like Haridas Thakur. If you take, he was also chastised and punished in so many marketplaces, 24 marketplaces, I think, 21. Okay, so he undergoes so many difficulties, right? So we see that devotees, no, they undergo so many trials and tribulations, but because they are fully dependent on the Lord, they are completely surrendered and take every difficulty as a mercy of the Lord, right? So that actually is the real position of a pure devotee or an advanced devotee. And they never protest actually. No, they will not. They won't say that okay, oh Lord, you have given me. I'm such an advanced devotee. No, you have given me so much troubles. Why you are troubling me, or why you are giving so much problems to me? What have I done wrong? So the devotee never thinks that like that actually. A pure advanced devotee, you'll always think that actually I should have received much more than this. No, but actually because of your mercy only you are giving this much. Or no, or actually you just think that it is a mercy of Lord. Like that actually the devotee thinks. So Jada Bharat was in such an elevated stage. He was thinking like this, that no everything actually is just tolerating all the inconveniences which is happening to him, because his only focus is go back to the he's finish his activity in the material world and go back, because already he has had very bad experience in the past life. So he did not want to take any chance at all. So any difficulty coming, he was tolerating. Okay, so then so hearing actually the talks of Jada Bharat, Rahugana, Maharaj Rahugana, no, he I understand that actually this person is not an ordinary person, right? So actually Maharaj Rahugana, he was quite well versed in scriptures, and he was also a seeker of absolute truth. So as soon as Jada Bharat starts talking about giving the philosophical explanation about the soul, immediately understands the position of Jada Bharat. No, actually immediately he jumps out of the palanquin, and immediately fell flat on the feet of Jada Bharat, right? So he actually immediately asks for pardon. So he actually says that Because of this, even though I may be as strong as Lord Shiva, I shall be vanquished without delay due to the offenses at the lotus feet of Vaishnava. He then prayed as follows. So basically, this is also very important to understand, no, the Vaishnava Aparadh, right? So the Vaishnava Aparadh, actually, we know that it is the biggest offense that one can commit. It can immediately destroy all our spiritual credits. Whatever we have achieved in our spiritual life, everything can be destroyed in a moment. So Rahugana, being aware of the Vedic instruction, no, he was saying that even if I am so great as great as Shiva, but I can be completely eliminated or destroyed if I commit an offense to Vaishnava. So he was aware. He says like that, and he prays to him. He begs pardon. Right? He says, King Ravana says, "O Brahmana, you appear to be moving in this world very much covered and unknown to others. Who are you? My dear sir, I am not at all afraid of the thunderbolt of King Indra, nor I am afraid of the serpentine piercing trident of Lord Shiva. I do not care about the punishment of Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, nor I am afraid of fire scorching sun, moon, wind, nor the weapons of Kuvera. Yet I am afraid of offending a Brahmana. I am very much afraid of this. I am now present before you and I am seeking enlightenment from you. How can I advance in spiritual life?" So this way, Ravagana actually completely surrenders to Jadabharat, and beg for his forgiveness. Okay, so with that, the 10th chapter is over. Then we move to 11th chapter. Okay, so here actually the instructions of Jadabharat we can see. So this chapter name is Jadabharat instructs King Ravagana. So here actually, so in the last stage actually we see that Ravagana surrenders, and now Jadabharat instructs. So basically we see that whenever there are instructions given, we see that the person who is receiving instructions will take an inferior position. He has to actually become a disciple, and the person who is giving instruction, he takes the position of spiritual master. Otherwise, actually, that is not possible to convey the scriptural knowledge. We see that in Bhagavad Gita, right? Shishyasteham sadimam tam prabannam, right? So when Arjuna says that no, I am a surrendered soul, no, please instruct me, right? So he actually becomes his devotee. Similarly, here also we can see that relationship, right? So the Brahmana. So now Jadabharat actually gives his instruction. So here also there are a lot of instructions, from Jadabharat. So by the instructions itself, so actually Jadabharat talks about the principles of like bodily concept, human. So he doesn't instruct in a very he doesn't give the advanced spiritual instruction to Ravagana, but he gives the basic instructions to understand what is the position of the living entities, like that. Okay, so we will just briefly go through it. Those are some of the instructions which are there, which are relevant. Yeah, so in the beginning, Jadabharat started. So there is a lot of similarity how Jadabharat speaks and Lord Krishna speaks. Okay, so Krishna actually in the beginning tells Arjuna, right? He tells that you are actually speaking like a very learned person. So before this, King Ravagana actually gives some philosophy also, little bit philosophy. He'll also try to talk. He will he'll ask many questions to Jadabharat, which actually we have not discussed. So that questions appear to be very intelligent, but actually, somebody who's completely realized the soul and Paramatma, the devotion, the spiritual principle, he will not ask this question. So the same thing happens in Bhagavad Gita. We know that shloka, right? What is the shloka? Regarding Krishna, in the beginning, chastises Arjuna. So Krishna says, Shri Bhagavan Vaja Ashochan Anvasocha Swastvam Pratna Vadamscha Bhashade Gadasun Agadasumscha Nanu Shochadi Pandita. So what Krishna says is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise men lament neither for the living nor the dead. Indirectly, he says that you are a fool, right? And you are speaking like a intelligent person, but actually, what you're speaking is not intelligent. So, similarly, Jadabharat will start his conversation. He says like this: that, my dear king, although you are not at all experienced, you are trying to speak like a very experienced man. Consequently, you cannot be considered an experienced person. An experienced person does not speak the way you are speaking about the relationship between master and servant, or about material pains and pleasures. These are simply external activities. Any advanced, experienced man, considering the absolute truth, does not think in this way. So, further we see the different instructions. I'm just reading it actually. So he actually, some highlights. A dream becomes, so Jadabharat says, a dream becomes automatically known to a person as false and immaterial. And similarly, one eventually realizes that the material happiness in this life or the next, or on this planet or higher planet, is insignificant. When one realizes this, the Vedas, although an excellent source, are insufficient to bring about the direct knowledge of the truth. Okay, so this actually here, there is a very interesting point. So one thing is like, okay, how the material existence is. No, Jadabharat actually is saying that it is like a just like a dream is not insignificant. Suppose in the dream actually, if we lose a lot of money, we don't really care. No, after we wake up, we don't worry about anything. No, so if you have, so similarly, a person who is very advanced in spiritual knowledge, who understands the principle of soul, he will not worry too much about material happiness or distresses, right? So if he's advanced, he doesn't bother about all those things, because actually this is a temporary existence, right? So that is what actually. And then one important point he mentions is that when one realizes this, the Vedas, although an excellent source, are insufficient to bring the direct knowledge of truth. So it is one thing is very interesting here actually. So it is saying that Vedas. So because as we discussed yesterday, right, the Vedas actually are very vast, and it has different sections. So some of them actually talks about karma ganda, various sections. So in Brahma Samhita it is mentioned, no, Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhaktau, right? It is mentioned. So even unless and until somebody is a devotee, one is a devotee of the Lord, even if you search through Vedas or if you study scriptures, you cannot actually, it's not easy to come to the conclusion that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? It is not easy to come to that conclusion. So that is why it's called Vedeshu Durlabham. But Adurlabham Atma Bhakto. But for a devotee, it is Adurlabha. But for another person, it is Durlabha. It is not easy to understand the Supreme Lord, right? So many people, there are people who are called Vedavadas or Vedavadaratas, right, who actually are attracted to the flowery words of Vedas. So many of the Smartha Brahmanas, they are in that category. So they are attracted to the flowery words of Vedas. No, actually, Vedas explain things in a very flowery manner. No, they talk about various things like how you can become opulent, how can you go to higher planetary system, about dharma, or various things. Actually, Vedas explain in a very flowery way. So some people are just attracted to the superficial meaning of the Vedas, and then they don't go beyond that. So that is why Jadabharat is explaining like this, right? So also we know in Bhagavad Gita there is a shloka, no? It says that Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. So Krishna says that Traigunya Vishaya Veda means the Vedas are talking about the three gunas, which was Sattva, Rajo, Tamo guna. But actually he's asking Arjuna, you rise above the three modes, right? So basically the aim of a devotee is not just to come to the mode of goodness, right? So Vedas actually, generally the Vedas, so-called Vedas, most of the Vedic scriptures only talk how to come to the um, Sattva, right? But actually, what Arjuna wants Krishna, Krishna wants Arjuna to rise above the three modes, right? Traigunya, Vishaya, Veda. So actually, this way we know that Vedas, no, so that is why we should not just get attached to the scholarship aspect of the Veda, like reading so many scriptures and trying to understand. But we have to focus actually, and then we have to follow our previous acharyas in the parampara and focus on the devotional principles which are mentioned in Vedas. Because as we mentioned, there are so many customers, right? If you have a mall, there are so many shops in the mall, right? And then there are different customers. So different customers will go to different shops. But actually, somebody who wants the best thing, like for example, the most precious thing, the jewels, he will go to that jewelry shop, which sell the best. So somebody like that, the highest perfection we know is actually the attaining Krishna Prema, or going back to spiritual world, to the topmost planet, Goloka Vrindavan. So there will be different people who are seeking other things also. From Vedas you can get everything, because Vedas is a vast, Veda means knowledge and is given by the Lord, but actually it has different sections for different kind of people, right? And Vedas also talk about different things, like it also talk about like medicine, and like various aspects of knowledge, right? About how to, what is it called, different kinds of like fighting, for example, no? So different principles are mentioned in Vedas. So if you want, you can find, for example, astrology is there. So different things are there. So ultimately, we have to understand by the help of a spiritual master what is the ultimate purpose that you have to derive from Vedas, and then accordingly we have to progress. So this is just a small kind of information related to what we are discussing. Then Jadavarat actually further talks. He actually, in many shlokas, he talks about the mind. So while giving instruction to Rahugana, he, as I mentioned, he doesn't talk directly about devotion service. He's talking in a term actually which Rahugana can understand. And even after explaining, Rahugana could not understand, and he asked Jadavarat to again repeat certain things. So that is why he comes to that particular platform and he tries to explain. So in this explanation, I will read some another important instructions. So Jadabharat says, the mind is conducted by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Okay, there are 11 senses, which actually are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses and 5 working senses, and the mind. So mind sometimes is added as one of the senses, or mind is the leader of the senses. and then there are 5 material elements, the Panchabhutas, right? So he's saying that, and out of the 16 items, the mind is the chief. Therefore, the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies among demigods, human beings, animals, and birds. When the mind is situated in the higher or lower position, it accepts a higher or lower material body. So actually, Jadavarat will explain to Ravgana, actually, and the mental platform kind of, which actually he can understand. He says that the mind actually, so it is also true that the mind actually, is one of the main reason for us to either progress or no, or what do you call, come down to lower species, because actually everything is, all the different desires and vasanas, these are all stored in the mind, right, over many lifetimes, and the mind will keep on giving you different options, like I mean, it always impel the living entity to do different action. It will force, the living entity to do different activities. So that way, so Jadabrat is actually, mentioning that mind actually is the chief cause. And it further says the materialistic mind covering the living body, living entity soul, carries to different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the mind, the living entity suffers or enjoy material distress and happiness. Being thus illusion, the mind further creates pious and impious activities and their karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned. When the mind is absorbed in the material sense gratification, it causes suffering. And when detached from material sense gratification, it brings about original brightness of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so further, the individual soul bereft of Krishna consciousness has many ideas and activities created in the mind by the external energy. This is what actually the point, right? So the mind actually, creates so many what you call fantasies, right? They have been existing from time immemorial. Sometimes they are manifest in the awakening stage and in the dream state, but during the deep sleep or trance they disappear. A person who is liberated in this life, Jivan Mukta, can see all these things vividly. So like that, actually, Jadavarat explains, how the mind actually, is the chief cause of bondage. Then further he says, the soul's designation, the mind is the cause of all tribulations in the material world. As long as this fact is unknown to the conditioned living entity, he has to accept the miserable condition of the material body and wander within the universe in different forms of life, different positions. Because the mind is affected by disease, lamentation, illusion, attachment, greed, and enmity, it creates bondage and false sense of intimacy within this material world. The uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. O king, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service of the lotus feet of the Lord or the spiritual master. Like that, actually, he gives example. So similar example we can see in Bhagavad Gita also, right? In Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter, 5th sloka, it says about mind. Udharet atmanam natmanam avashadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva riburatmana. So actually what it means is that a man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So this is very, very important actually, right? So one way what we can understand, see, there are different paths to making progress in spiritual life. We know that, no, there is karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, bhakti yoga, etc., right? So if you take dhyana yoga, actually, which is the process, which is using the Ashtanga yoga system, right? So ultimately yoga means to connect. So all the yogas are ultimately meant to connect to Supreme Lord. So in Ashtanga yoga, we see that, no, many of the exercises, I mean, the pranayama, right, controlling the breath, right? So these are all actually meant to control the mind, right? So actually, the main problem is the mind for the living entity, right? In whatever, even if you're in the material platform, also if you're in the spiritual platform, also, mind actually is very difficult to overcome the mind. So that's why Arjuna says, no, Chanjalam hi mana Krishna pramadi balavad dridam, right? Tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. So Krishna actually, when Krishna explains the Ashtanga yoga process, Arjuna says that, no, this process is very, very difficult for me to do because the mind is very restless and obstinate, and it's very difficult. It's like a mad thing. Right? I cannot control. I can control the wind, raging wind, but I can't control the mind. Like that, actually, Arjuna says to Krishna, because Arjuna is such a elevated person that he's not as good a Kesha. He's conquered the sleep, and he's actually very advanced. But Arjuna is saying like this. So actually, if you really analyze, the mind is actually one of the biggest obstacles for us, for anybody to make progress. Also in spiritual life also, because the mind actually is continuously giving us. So this we can easily observe when we are chanting. Right? When we chant, we can see that, sometimes if you are very neglectful in chanting, then we will not see that because it becomes an habit for us. So when we are neglectful in chanting, what happens is that chanting becomes an automatic. It becomes an involuntary activity. Just like we are breathing, right? We don't know we are breathing. Automatically, breathing happens. We inhale and exhale. We never worry about the breathing. We don't have to explicitly do anything. So similarly, if you neglect chanting, chanting also tends to become involuntarily. Chanting will go on in one way, and your mind will be somewhere else, right? And then if you don't bother, it will continue like that, and you will not even realize that it is happening. But actually, if you try to become little attentive, then you can see that the mind actually is like a small, obstinate child. It will not listen to you at all. Every time you try to bring the mind to focus on the chanting, it actually, within few seconds or minutes, actually it'll run away to something else. And so we'll keep on doing this exercise. So we can understand from that, the mind is very, very difficult. But most of the time, everything is automatic. We don't realize actually, understand until somebody is intelligent who tries to analyze what is happening within the body, what is happening to me. No, we'll not realize all these things because everybody just works in instinct. You can see so many people are there outside, right? So-called educated people, intelligent people, but generally, they just work out of instinct. In a particular context, if you put them, they behave in a particular way, but they don't explicitly think that, okay, what is happening to my mind, what is happening to intelligence. They don't. Nobody thinks like that. It just happens because we are actually forced by the modes of nature. But a person who is intelligent, he can, when he starts analyzing, then we can understand that actually mind actually is the chief culprit, who is actually preventing us, from making the progress. Because mind also, whenever we are trying to do a spiritual activity, the mind actually will give us so many reasons, not to do it. So it'll try to. So it appears sometimes very intelligent reasons, and then we feel that, okay, this is the right thing. Okay, so like that we'll justify. Okay, no, it is not required, or no, this is right. Okay, let me do this now. I will not. I will do devotional service later. For example, let's say we want to go for book distribution. Then now mind will tell so many reasons, okay, why we should not go for book distribution, because so many reasons it will give. So similarly for any devotional activity. So this way we have to really understand the position of mind, right? So that is why. But one thing is that, as per whatever process given to us by our acharyas, but we have to be aware of this. But no, we don't have to explicitly or separately endeavor to control the mind. If you just follow the instructions which is already given, right? Actually, whatever, following the four regulative principles, chanting the holy names. The chanting the holy names, by continuously chanting the holy names and always being aware of the 10 offenses, gradually the mind becomes controlled without actually, without explicitly, or by, like, for example, going to a course for mind control, attending a seminar for mind control, without explicitly doing it. If you are just sincere in your endeavor and follow the instructions of spiritual master sincerely, and just do chant properly, what is told to us is just hear the chanting. Chant each and every syllable properly, and keep on hearing the chanting. So that is what is recommended for us. We are not asked to imagine some pastimes of the Lord. No, nothing. We should not do anything artificially. Okay, so if you only do that instruction sincerely with faith, gradually, mind will become under control. But actually, we should be aware what is happening. Okay, this is what is happening. We should not do a mechanical chanting, as an involuntary activity without knowing. Chanting goes on, and I'll do my work. Actually, I'll check the mobile. No, I'll talk to somebody. But chanting is also going on, without my knowledge. So this is a tendency. Actually, if you are careless, this will become a habit for us actually. So we have to watch out. So that is why many times, we actually, the congregation, I mean, chanting with other devotees are help actually sometimes, because when we are alone, we are completely neglectful. We don't worry about anything, and then we do whatever we like. But some other people are sitting, means we will be cautious. At that time, we'll try to chant nicely. So this way we can get a glimpse, right? What is the role of mind in our devotion life? Okay, so with that, actually, we come to the end of chapter 11. Now, chapter 12, I think we should we should continue, because we have come to the end of our time, right? What is planned? Okay, so we'll stop here, and if there are any questions, I can try to answer if possible. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, this knowledge, like mind is our enemy and mind is our friend. So whenever we remember that knowledge, we'll become cautious. But generally, the tendency is we'll forget, no, Prabhu. How to make it remembering knowledge?
See, that's what it is told that the chanting is the only solution. See, there are problems maybe infinite, but solution is always one. You have to chant. See, because chanting is the medicine for everything, Prabhu. See, the chanting is, we call chanting as mantra meditation. See, meditation is the process which is for mind control, right? So if you take yoga, pranayama is given. So pranayama actually, meditation is also followed by, it also involves pranayama. Basically, controlling the breath. Mechanically we can try to control the mind because they are interconnected actually. But we don't have to, because it is not recommended for devotee, to do waste time in extra things actually, because we already don't have time. We don't have time to read the scriptures. No, don't have time to read Bhagavatam. So we are all lagging behind. So what is recommended we have to do properly. So if it is told that no, I am not a great example in this case, but I have realization, or no, I have understanding that when our chanting becomes very nice, then automatically mind will comes under control, because our chanting is not proper. No, that is why all these problems happening. So whatever time we chant, right, 2 hours or 2.5 hours, actually we chant. If you try to do a focused chanting with proper attention, just following the instruction, basic instruction, like chant properly, hear every syllable, and then continue chanting without the mind allowing to. Whenever the mind wanders, bring back. So this way, if you properly chant, because holy names are very powerful, right? Holy names are not different from Krishna, so it has the power to deliver us. So we should have faith, and if you sincerely chant, if you have very good quality chanting, then mind will automatically come under control. We don't have to separately do anything else for the mind control. That's what actually my understanding, Prabhu. So there is no other solution.
Okay, bro.
So even I like to understand the experience of Aprajit Prabhu and Shabnan Prabhu when they do chanting on Sunday evening and we all listen. How is your experience, Prabhu, when basically you understand that everyone is listening to your chanting?
Yes, Prabhu. So basically, that 3 rounds is my best chanting of the entire week. Because the consciousness is like, everybody is listening, and we have to chant every syllable properly and things like that. I think I'm trying to follow that on regular days also. One thing which I have noticed is when the mind is wandering, right, it is always either thinking about the past or it's thinking about the future. Future could be like even something that you wanted to do, that day evening or that day afternoon, something, or whatever you have done yesterday or whatever you have done a week back, things like that. So yeah, what I felt, right, when we are chanting on Sunday, the mind is focused on the present, right? Because that present moment I want to chant nicely, at least that consciousness is there, which has a side effect of basically concentrating on the syllable, as Prabhu said. So yeah, I think what I am trying to do is like basically trying to get the mind to think about present, be in the present. That present work is concentrate on the mantra. That is what I was trying. Yeah.
One thing Guru Maharaj actually says is that Jayaprakash Swami Maharaj, His Holiness, he says like if to keep a small notebook. I think here I heard him saying many times actually. So many people tell that so many thoughts comes to me while chanting, right? So he always recommend to keep a small notebook in your pocket or wherever, and as soon as any thought comes, you have to stop chanting and write down that particular thought, what you want to do. So this is one of the ways actually, Guru Maharaj has suggested. Yeah. So see, I mean, different things work for different devotees, but
Yeah.
ultimately the basic principle is the same only always. And there are so many seminars and Java shops, etc. on Java, right? So, yeah, but many people even after attending so many workshops, some people actually improve, but some people are finding it very difficult to control. Actually, this is the basically it's the mind which is playing here. We some people feel that okay, so much time I have to sit. No, like they feel very restless. How can I sit for 2 hours and chant continuously? Right, so mind will keep on telling okay, I have to do this, I have to do that, this way, like, yeah. So I think it is a purification process, we have to go, everybody has to go through, and based on the level of each devotee, the hardships may be less or more to overcome. Avraj Prabhu want to share? Gaurav Prabhu was asking.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I have a doubt in Jad Bharat story, Jad Bharat Maharaj story. Actually, when we are able to help another soul, means when he saved the deer, then he fall down. But actually, when we are able to help a soul or any other living being, is it that much sinful, Prabhuji, to fall down?
You're talking the example of the deer.
Yes, Prabhuji. He saved a deer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then his sadhana, everything fell down. But when we saw this Ajamila story, even though he didn't do any sadhana or anything, at the end of the time he did the he just called the name of his son. Then he went back to the Godhead. But Jad Bharat entire life he did the service to the Lord, or he was in sadhana, but he saved a deer. Means when we are in the condition, uh, God has given us an opportunity to, means we should not be, what I feel is, we should not be like selfish, only my sadhana, myself, I'll not take care of any and other living entity and all. How much it is
No,
uh,
Mataji.
if
See,
wrong,
yeah,
I'm
see, everything looks on what platform you're looking, Mataji. So, if you see, basically, many times we see, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu say talking about Jiva Dvaya, right? So, actually, the real compassion, we know that it is for the soul, not for the body, right? So, if you basically see, he's completely detached person. He doesn't have any responsibility. It is told that when somebody becomes a devotee, pure devotee, he's not renny to anybody. No, he's not renny to his forefathers, not demigod. No, he's not having any what you call. Debts. He doesn't have to do any of those things actually.
Obligations.
So yes, bro.
No obligations for
Yeah,
anyone.
yeah, no obligations anyone. So the thing is here actually the point is like this, Mataji. See, if even if you have one small desire to continue in the material world, then actually it is not possible to go back to spiritual world. That is the general principle. So see, the Jadavara is completely aware and he repents actually himself, right, that he had done a mistake. Because see, everything we have to understand that the entire world, everything is conducted by the Supreme Lord. It is told that not even a leaf, blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. So if the Lord actually wants to protect the deer, it will be protected actually. See, we are just an instrument, right? So by protecting the deer, it is Jalabraj actually his intention is not to no like give him spiritual knowledge. That is one thing. Second thing is that he could have taken care of the deer without actually affecting his, without getting attached to it. For example, no, many of us actually like many grihasthas, we see that no, we actually take care of the children, but then we should not be attached. That is the lesson for us actually. So we as a duty we should do our responsibilities, but we should never get attached to anybody. So even if one small attachment, if you are attached to your child or attached to your spouse, all of them actually can be a hindrance in attaining perfection, because we have to completely see the question principle again in Jadabharat's case is that Ande Narayana Smriti. What did you remember, or what was his consciousness at the time of death? Because Krishna is already clearly told that whatever consciousness at the time of death, actually that actually will result in the next body. So as I mentioned, sometimes the examples which are given is are actually like some extreme examples, or sometimes it is exceptions than rule, or it is just to give, as I told you in the beginning, right? Jada Bharat's story, Bharat Maharaj's story is actually a warning for all the devotees. How